to the show where you don't know if it's part of the show. Welcome to the show. If you don't know, it's part of the show. Didn't they teach you to reach for the stars while opening up the bars and keeping you chained down with mortgage bills and cars? Vaccines for your arms, kids sounding like supercharged, caffeinated hate-filled scars and rage-quit repertoires. No answers for yards, caught up in emotion that's not even yours. Imposter truths like impeccable retards, lined up for your serving of gish galloping wars. No remedy can't save the lost, in love with the yarn. I'm tired of walking into refracted shards, poor science displayed by disgusting bards. Soaked in sin with your dupe is delight in a new hand of cards. Been so long, seems like for love I'm just too hard, I'm just too hard. I said, welcome to the show where you don't know if it's part of the show. Welcome to the show. If you don't know, you don't know. Intoxicated 8 makes you believe you're spinning in space while you have no shame or grace. It's a disdainful state I used to contemplate, how to save myself from my own self-hate. Wonder why I was even made with a dreadful fate, forced to try and awake with a full plate. No one to help me stay awake or educate. I've had to liberate and fight through hidden gates. But my brother, heaven could never be late, and rockets don't work in space. It's all fake, the show is on Mars. It's a joke, but you're too far gone, it won't be long. Fepe's beak is strong. We have our song and we march along like streams of knowledge leading to God's holy pond, and lives of truth that hits the bong and sings the song, turns mankind from the wrong. We come in peace with a holy gown and all of us wearing our holy crowns. So the earth is flat and we probably just won't get along, just to go along. I said, welcome to the show where you don't know if it's part of the show. Welcome to the show. If you don't know, you don't know.
back to another exciting adventure of Red Hen Radio. I'm your host, Travis Finlay. Today's guest is no stranger to those who are familiar with alternative truth. Max Egan is from New South Wales, Australia. Max looks a bit like Mick Fleetwood, but that's another story. He also has a YouTube channel called The Crow House. Be sure you check that out, subscribe, and hit that bell notification to be kept up to date with Max Egan and The Crow House. He's a musician and an artist who has been experimenting with computer art for around 6 years now. Most of the art found on his website, thecrowhouse.com, has either been done by hand or in Photoshop and Bryce. And if you really need to know more about Max, he suggests that you might have too much time on your hands, but if you're really interested in learning more, you can always visit his website. I will give you a little bit of a taste of his Who Am I page. Okay, folks, well, this is the nitty... No, I'm not even going to try to do... That was a horrible... G'day, Mike. Max Egan bio reading, take 2. I'm sure many clan members and many other people besides, including members of my own family, find me somewhat of a strange entity and possibly a touch nutty. I don't watch television except for a couple of documentary programs. I think television is a propaganda machine that feeds false information to the masses. I believe television teaches people what to think, not how to think. I don't use credit cards. I'm very outspoken and have strong views on politics, the war on terror, fractional reserve banking, and some aspects of many religions. And I can be highly opinionated. Well, can't we all, Max? All right, enough of that introduction. I'm sure you are familiar with Max Egan. Sit back, relax, enjoy the show, and as always, if you have not done so already, please subscribe, hit that thumb up, share, and hit that bell notification to be kept up to date with Red Hen Radio. Max, on your website, you state, any and all work that I've done on the internet, I've done mainly for your son, first and foremost. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the thing is, I mean, the world is not what people think it is. And, you know, when I had a son, I had a child, brought a child into the world, it gave me a whole new perspective of responsibility. And, you know, children are so gentle. They're such wonderful, gentle beings. And I just sort of saw my son and I saw this system and I thought, well, this kid's going to get eaten up alive by this system. Now, I can't stand idly by and watch that happen. So, you know, now that I have a child, I feel I have a responsibility to make an active attempt in turning this into a better world than what it is, and definitely better than the way we're heading. You know, I mean, I've been researching a lot of this stuff for my whole life, and so I could see where we were going. But, you know, it's almost like a bit of a game or a spy novel or just an exciting thing that you do looking at this conspiracy stuff. You know, I mean, sure, it's important, but it's just this life that's this secret sort of thing that exists on the side that we all find exciting. But, you know, when I had a child, I realized the importance of it. I realized how much I'd suffered through the world and how much worse the world was now than what it was when I was a child, when I was his age, and how hard I'd actually had to do it up to that point. And I thought, wow, you know, if he was ever cast into the situations that I was in, chances are, given the way the world is now, he wouldn't survive. He wouldn't come through it the way I did. And so, yeah, I just felt I had a responsibility to change that and to provide a better future for him in any way that I could. And so that's the main reason that I do what I do, because humanity really doesn't deserve the future that they're getting. And the kids that are coming through the system now have no real reference point for what freedom is. It's up to people of my generation to, you know, make a difference for the lack of responsibility we showed during that period. I mean, mainly due to the programming we had as well. I mean, you can't blame anyone. That's something that we tend to do, is blame this generation or that group or whatever. But everybody's been subject to their programming. So, you know, when he was born, I just thought, well, it stops here. The buck stops here, you know. So that's why I do it. Yeah, I mean, I think it just needs to be done.
All right, so your website is the Crow House. Tell us about that name.
Again, that came from my son. There was a period in my life where when I was divorced from my wife, and there was a period where I was pretty estranged from her and I wasn't able to see my son very often. So we used to get together and play in a game clan together. That was the only way we could sort of interact. You know, we would play enemy territory together. He'd be a medic or something, and I'd be an engineer, and we'd go and do whatever, do the missions. And my name during the game, he was a big Matthew Riley fan. He's an author. And my game clan name that he gave me was Scarecrow. And he was Black Knight and I was Scarecrow. And so I ended up doing a lot of artwork for the clan. And so I wanted a website to post the artwork on, so it became the Crow House, just from Scarecrow. And then I kind of felt guilty that I had this website and I didn't have any sort of truth on there. I thought, well, it can't just be about art. I need to start telling people my opinion of things. And so I started posting truth on there, and then it just turned into a truth portal, and all the art kind of disappeared. And, it's just the way it went. So it was all just a series of events. There was no plan in it at all in the Crow House. It just sort of all happened that way. And I never even planned to be a public speaker or do radio shows or anything that I'm doing. It just all sort of happened that way. The universe just led me to this point. And that website was created due to that game clan. The name came about due to the game clan. And yeah, I mean, I get a lot of people asking me about the reference of the crow and symbolism and all sorts of stuff. Well, honestly, it was just a 12-year-old kid saying, I like the name Scarecrow, Dad. And he gave it to me for the clan, and that was the website. So, yeah, no real mystery in that one. It's just what it ended up. But it's kind of worked out good because in many ways, because of the name, it kind of flies under the radar, I think, of people looking for, alternate media sites and things. So it's very hard to for people to find it, to want to close it down. Plus, I don't have any advertising on it. I don't have any subscriber section. There's no money being made from it. So it's kind of under the radar in many ways, due to the nature of the website. So that's good as well. I mean, things just kind of happen and fall into place. This whole activist life I'm leading has just all kind of fallen into place without me really planning any of it. Even when I look at the life I had before I was an activist, as a musician and traveling a lot, getting all the free time to do all the study into ancient history and all the stuff I wanted to do, it all just provided the means for me to get to what I'm doing now without me really planning to do it. It's just interesting how life paths unfold, really. If you throw yourself to the wind, you can ride it, and it'll take you where you're supposed to go if you're open to it. It's an interesting ride. It's been an interesting journey.
I've listened to quite a number of the talks and your interviews and whatnot, but I'd like to see if we can get some specifics if you can. What specifically showed you that history is not what we've been told?
Look, this is something that I've been pursuing since I was like 8 years old, the concept of history and the fact that our history is wrong. I mean, there's so much that there's so many hundreds and hundreds of artifacts lying all around the world, all the what they call parts, out-of-place artifacts. Everything that we see from the ancient past tells you that history is wrong if you look at it with the right eyes. That's the thing. It's just everything tells you that it's wrong. And when you look at the timeline we're given and you look at the explanations for what we're given, I mean, this is what drew me into this, because of all these explanations. When I was 8 years old and my parents told me they didn't know how they built the pyramids, I started looking into this, and I wanted to know how they built the pyramids. And the pyramids were poured. They tell you how they did it. There's a stele near Zaire in northern Egypt, near Alexandria. There's a stele that tells you how they poured the pyramids. It's a type of concrete mix. It's a geopolymer they're made of, a mixture of limestone and aggregates and seashells and granite and all sorts of stuff. But they tell you on a stele how they did it. But that's what got me into it was the fact that no matter what explanation they give you for all of these hundreds and thousands of artifacts around the world, none of them make sense. It just depends on whether people are prepared to look outside of the box and think outside of the box. For many people, they'll look at all this stuff and they'll say, well, no, it's not unexplained because I read it here in a book. But I look at the book and I go, well, hang on, this is just a theory, because this book doesn't actually explain anything. It's just giving you an idea of how it was done, someone's perception of how it was done, but it doesn't actually explain any of the mysteries at all. So, you know, you find the evidence is everywhere, brother. It's absolutely everywhere. And when I saw the recent work of people like Fomenko, and then I started referencing the old works of Newton and people like this who are all saying history's wrong, the timeline's out, they've added at least 1,000 years to our history, then it all begins to make sense how they've done this and how they've changed everything. But honestly, anybody who goes and travels, just go and look at the pyramids, go to Lebanon, go to Baalbek, go to any of these places, any of these ancient sites, and look at the official story that you're given for the reasons that these sites exist, and none of them makes sense. None of it makes sense at all. You have to jump through so many mental hoops to believe what we're given in the history books, that anybody with the ability to rub more than 2 brain cells together should realize that the evidence is right in front of them everywhere, all around the world, in every country. And even down to some of the buildings that we've got in our modern cities. A lot of these buildings are very, very old buildings that do not appear to have been built by the current inhabiting civilizations, you know. So it's everywhere, brother. It's in places people would least expect, but if they're just prepared to look, they'll find the evidence of it overwhelming and everywhere.
So your reference to the information given about the construction of the pyramids, is that something that you find satisfactory, the place where you said if you go there, or are you challenging that narrative? If you go to that tourist location and look at the description of the description of the construction of the pyramids, would you call that narrative into question?
Look, I call all narratives into question, but the interesting part about that is that stele, the famine stele, which is at Elephantine near Zaire in northern Egypt, this is not on the tourist map. This is a place that they don't tell people about. Nobody goes there. Not too many people know about that stele. They call it disinformation. The Egyptologists, the current Egyptologists say, oh, that's just a mythology they had on that stele. It's got all these kings and stuff that didn't exist, and they had lifespans way beyond what they're supposed to have, and so it's just rubbish. You can't pay any attention to it, you know. So they don't want you to see it. They won't tell you it's there. No one knows it's there unless they know it's there and they go looking for it specifically, but you won't find it on any tourist maps. But what it tells you is if you get limestone and you dissolve it in water and you mix it with certain aggregates, then it will solidify into a harder form of weather-resistant limestone, which is much, much harder than normal limestone and much more enduring than normal limestone. And you find that the limestone in the Giza quarry is water-soluble. You get a little bit of that and put it in a glass overnight, it's powder in the morning. It's just turned to sludge. So, you know, it's water-soluble limestone. If you mix it with aggregates, you get the exact type of material that the pyramids are built of. If you go and look at the pyramids and look at the stone and the type of stone. And there's also a man called Professor Davidovitz, who looked at the famine stele, and then he got the limestone and he got all the aggregates and he tried it, and he came up with a block which looks exactly like the blocks that the pyramid is made from. So, you know, when you consider the concept that they were just simply boxed up and poured, it makes a great deal of sense. I mean, that doesn't detract from the fact that they brought all the granite stones in to build the king's chamber, what we term the king's chamber, all that stuff in the middle. But that could have even been a furnace in the middle. That could have been some form of fireplace to cure the freshly poured concrete by creating some sort of heating system in the middle. I mean, it could have even been used for that at one stage. So it's anybody's guess. But yeah, the famine stele that tells you how these pyramids were poured, this is not on any main tourist list. You actually have to look this up if you want to find out about it. I only found out about it because I'd done so much research into Egyptology, and I'd gone and visited Egypt, and I'd gone to all the places that they don't really tell you about. You know, like the Temple of Abydos that's got the flower of life etched through the stone. There's a stone pillar that's got a flower of life that looks like it's laser cut into the stone. It's actually burnt into the stone, and it's burnt all the way through the pillar. So it appears on both sides of the pillar like a black mark. But it's not, so it looks like it's been laser cut, but it's actually not cut. It hasn't cut the stone. It's just burnt it all the way through. What does that? What technology does that? So, yeah, there's a lot we're not hearing about history. Even that fact that flower of life exists in the Temple of Abydos, and they don't tell you about that either. That's another place they don't like you to go to. So there's all sorts of places they don't tell you about. So, that tends to bring a lot of these concepts into credence, into respectability, the fact that they won't tell you about it. And plus, coupled with the fact that, like I said, the limestone in the Giza Quarry is water soluble, so you can see exactly how they would have done it. And there it is on the steel. They even talk about building 3 great monuments on the steel. But again, mainstream Egyptologists will tell you this is just a fiction. It's just an insignificant steel that you need to pay no attention to.
All right, so I think that's a good segue to bring up the mud flood. So I heard a talk that you gave back in July where you mentioned it, but I didn't come across it until maybe a month and a half ago. And I've tried to have conversations with people about it, and it's difficult for me to get the starting board because I'm not even sure where to begin. So my question for you is, what is the basic premise to the mud flood? Where does one begin even to start to suggest how to talk about it?
Well, it's a really interesting thing. I mean, we're calling it a mud flood because, for want of a better name, I mean, obviously it doesn't appear that people have gone and physically buried and shoveled, dirt onto buildings and buried them. But, we're finding evidence of buildings that have a whole level below ground floor. And this is right across the world. We're finding it in every country, here in Australia, in Sydney, in Melbourne, in Holland, in Italy, in England, in the Netherlands, I mean, in Russia, all over the place. We're finding these buildings that have a whole floor below ground. And it's just trying to figure out what happened. I mean, a lot of these buildings, you look at them, there's buildings in Holland that have got dates on them of like 1646, and you'll find that there's a whole floor below ground. And yet we're on street level here, and you look down, there's a whole floor with windows and doorways, and looks like doorways going into the street below your feet. I mean, which would indicate that the street was once a lot lower than what it is now. So what caused this? And if the building was built in 1746 or 1646, and this has gone and covered up at least 12 to 18 feet of construction right across Europe, why haven't we heard about this? Why isn't it in any history books? Why has this been covered up? Because there's evidence of it being there. And you'll find evidence in New York, evidence in a lot of the constructions around the United States. So the question is, why is all this stuff underground? Why would you ever build buildings like this with foundations like this? You're not going to build rooms and stuff below ground as foundations. It doesn't make sense. So this must have been once occupied. And if the buildings are only 400 or 500 years old, then why don't we know about this? That's the question. And, it's one of those things you look at it and go, well, is this possible that this could have happened? Well, here's the physical evidence to say, yes, it is possible, because here it is. Why are these buildings covered up with mud? And like I said, we're calling it a mud flood because we don't know what caused it. We don't know where it came from. We don't even know really what it is. All we know is that most of the buildings in our cities, most of the old buildings, the really old ones that will be termed Greco-Roman style or European style, neoclassical style, these sorts of buildings, you'll find that there's a whole level below ground that we don't know about. And the question is, why is it there? And since it is there and no one's told us about it, it just... What is it? Why? How? And all the evidence suggests that there's been some layer of soil, as a positive soil, possibly something like a mud flood that's gone over not the whole earth, but large sections of it. There's buried a lot of these buildings in almost every country, and the physical evidence is there. So again, it's just like what you were saying earlier with trusting your senses. I mean, you look at this, it's there. So why is it there? That's the question. We're just asking that question. Why is it there? What is this? What caused this? What was the event that covered up this much of the building? Because obviously you don't build buildings with a whole level below ground. It's pointless to do that. So what caused it? That's just what we're trying to determine at the moment, just trying to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, I can remember actually thinking about that observation for myself. I couldn't tell you where I was, but it was odd to me to see an entryway lower than ground level and windows. But I just thought, well, maybe that's just the way they did things back then. And I think that that's usually the typical default for someone who doesn't think beyond scrutiny, to just have a simple answer for things. But would wouldn't that just be an okay answer? I mean, if it was real, like, okay, your assessment, who would build a ground level, who would build a floor below ground level? Well, that might be your question, but for them, yeah, it made sense.
Exactly. Well, I've seen buildings like that as well, where I've seen these lower sections. And you think, oh, that's just the way they did it, but isn't it strange? But that's strange in itself that they would do that, and we don't do that anymore. You don't see any modern buildings, or very few, built like that. But it's when you start finding these buildings, like a large building, and they excavate the lot next to it to put a new building in there, and you find that it isn't just little doorways down, 4 or 5 feet below ground. It's entire floors that go down 20, 30 feet. You've got huge walls with bricked up windows and bricked up doorways and all sorts of stuff. What's this doing below ground?
Max, are we talking more than just servants' quarters, or a wine cellar, or a coal cellar?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We're talking about a complete extension of the entire building going below ground level, and like I say, bricked up doorways and bricked up windows. If it was just servants' quarters, or if it was a basement, why would there be bricked up arched windows and bricked up doorways? And why would all these things be down there? Why would you have rooms and all the stuff that's there with windows and doors that appear to be opening onto what was once a street? Yeah. I mean, it doesn't make sense to do that. If you're going to build a basement, you build a basement. If you're going to build a below ground or sub-ground level, well, you do it. But you don't put in all these extra arched windows and stuff. I mean, why would you even do that? It doesn't make sense. So it is every indication that all of these buildings were once above ground.
One of the things that this reminds me of is another channel. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but I think the channel is called John Levi. And he has been talking about, he's in America, so he's been talking about a lot of this with American cities. And one of the things that he brought up was this picture of New Jersey, where there's just an immense throng of people dressed in a way that we wouldn't dress going to the beach, like in full-blown suits, in just all of these pomp and circumstance. And so he's thinking out loud as he's looking through it. He's like, who goes to the beach like this? It's like these people don't know what a beach is for. But my thought as I was listening to him was, okay, maybe this is a cultural thing. It's not like this is the way we would do this. If someone from that era in the early 1900s looked into the future and saw how women dressed on the beach, they would say, what in the world, what kind of a society is that? But one of the things so for instance, he says, I think that this is an anomaly. It shows that this is not normal for these people. And he said, look how they're reclining on the beach and they don't even have blankets or towels. So my question, I was thinking, I wonder if you've ever thought about this, Max, or if you hadn't, how would you process a picture like this? Would you analyze it that way, or would you say, oh, that's just the way they did stuff back then?
Good question. I'd have to see the picture, and I'd have to read whatever article was surrounding the picture and what it was trying to tell me. I mean, I haven't seen the photograph, but I mean, who knows? I mean, who knows what the circumstances are? I mean, I'd want more background on it before I'd really be happy to give an opinion on it.
Okay, well, I'll hand that off to Mark then, and I will look that up and see if I can bring it up just for kicks. So go ahead, Mark.
You speak a lot about the New World Order, and recently we had George Poppy Bush buried. Maybe you don't want to speak ill of the dead, but would you have any sort of final words for George Herbert Walker Bush?
Yeah, a man who should have paid dearly for the crimes he committed. I don't want to speak ill of the dead. I mean, he's gone. I don't wish anybody dead. I feel more sorry for these people than anything, because I think their souls, if there is such a thing, are damned for all time for what they've done. So yeah, I mean, see him gone. He can't hurt any more people. He can't kill any more people. But he's left a horrible legacy behind him.
Yeah. Did you see at the funeral, the wives were all an envelope, and when they opened it, there was a shock on their faces. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see that. I didn't see it.
It's all over YouTube at the moment. If you have chance to look at the funeral and the envelopes, all the wives, that was Michelle and Laura and Dick Cheney's wife, were all given an envelope, and they opened it up in front of the cameras. And it must have been a picture or just one sentence, because the faces immediately got the context, and it was just one of shock.
Okay, I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Maybe it was all is known, or it's time to leave. You know, it's very interesting. Yeah, you were talking about
they're coming for you next.
Yeah, I hope so. Listen, you were talking about your son earlier on. I'm just going to play a role play here, and you're my uncle, and I respect you, and I've got a dichotomy. I've been offered 2 jobs, and I don't know which one to take. One is working for the tax office, and another is for going into construction. What would you advise me?
I would definitely. Well, it depends on your mindset, but I mean, construction would be better than the tax office unless you've got a very good mind about you and a great deal of integrity. In which case, you could possibly go into the tax office, and you could show people how they're being scammed by the tax office. So it depends on your mindset. But if you were my nephew and my son and you're asking my advice, then I would assume you to be at least partially awake. So perhaps you could actually serve the people better by joining the tax office and doing the right thing in that respect. Otherwise, join construction.
From within, yeah?
Yeah, you know. Crumble from within, you know. The people who pay taxes need a friend in the tax office. So if you have a good heart, then yeah, join the tax office.
You surprised me on that one. I share the same view as yourself, that the only way to bring the system down is to stop cooperating with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Or maybe you could do that from within the tax office. You know, you might not last, so get good construction skills while you're doing that, so when you get sacked, you can go into construction. Yeah. But get in there to try to make a difference by all means, if you can.
What about any civil service job?
Look, you know, I think we should stop all civil service jobs. I think people need to stop supporting the government, really, in all manner and shape or form that they can. I think if you're living, you know, honestly, if you want to get serious about it, if you're living with a government employee or someone who's causing harm in their work, you need to tell them to get another spouse or quit their job. You know, we need to stop supporting the system. Unless you're going to go in and infiltrate, like I said, with the tax department to try to undermine the system from within. But otherwise, no civil service jobs, no military jobs. People need to quit all these jobs and stop supporting the system, because it's just racketeering. It's our support for this system that causes all the problems, and we need to stop supporting it.
Yeah, the yellow vests in Paris, they're asking the controllers just to be nicer to them rather than bringing the system down.
That's the problem. You know, there was an element in there when it started. They said, no, we don't want the monarchy anymore. We want it gone. We don't want this government system anymore. But now it's turned into, we want better wages and we want better conditions. We want better this. I mean, they've co-opted it, and it's gone into another one of these colour revolutions, which is not going in the direction it originally started. They need to shut the country down and say, look, we've had enough. We're sick of the world being run by criminals. You know, that's what needs to happen. People need to acknowledge the fact that the world is run by criminals, and it's going to keep going until we shut it down. And we are the only ones who hold up. So I was hoping that's what we would see from the Yellow Vests. And that is the mentality that started it, which is our mentality that starts these revolutions in France. We see quite a few of them. Now, whenever the government does anything wrong, the people usually just shut the country down. And that's what they did with this. But again, it's been co-opted. And now, like you say, they're just asking them to please be nice as slave masters, which doesn't work and never will.
So I did just 10% of the population to stop cooperating. That would probably bring the government down. So that's what we're after. If that was to happen, what sort of preparation should we be doing now? That if the government was shut down, how would we survive?
Well, the thing is, we don't need the government now. The government just sits above all the services that operate already and demands that you do them in their way and give them a cut for doing them. You know, we'd still have construction, we've still got roadworks, we've still got all the stuff that we've got. We don't need government to dictate what people do and what they can and cannot do. You know, government's just simply racketeering. It gets in the way of everyone doing all the things they need to do and makes you do it this way and give us a cut. That's all government is. You know, if people were supporting each other, growing community gardens, and it might be hard in the city to do things like this, you know, but I'm sure there's parks, local parks, you know, you could turn into food forests. The only reason you don't is because the government won't let you. If the government wasn't there, you'd be able to grow your own food. You'd be able to do all these things. So, you know, the government, it isn't the government that puts the foods on the supermarket shelves and all this stuff. This is done by private contractors. This is done by trucking companies, done by food companies. All this stuff can run fine without government. There's a government shutdown in the United States at the moment. Did anyone notice that the government isn't there at the moment? Everything's still working. Hey, folks, look, government, the place is still working. Wow. Lesson for everybody. All it means is that there's going to be no new laws that can be brought in to inflict themselves upon you while the government is shut down. But, you know, all their other stuff's still there. All the bombs are still there. All the taxes are still there. The police are still there. All this stuff's still doing there. So how shut down is it really, you know? So, yeah, I mean, if people was to support each other and just start doing the right thing in all that they do, we wouldn't need the government. At the moment, we only need government to protect us from other governments who want to go to war with our governments, and it's always the governments that want to do the war, not the people. Doesn't matter where you go, you won't find any people who want to have a war. So, you know, we don't need them. It's just racketeering. But people are in fear of the unknown. They're in fear of taking responsibility for themselves, and they think the whole world would cease to exist if there was no government. And it's just not the truth.
I totally agree with you. I was taught no skills of even how to grow a potato at school. Yeah, I'm totally blind that way, and I think that's by design as well. Life skills are not taught to us.
They've taken everybody's life skills, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. Look at the kids now; they're telling the kids, modern kids, they don't even need to know how to write; they can just use their text, you know. So it's getting even worse than what it was when we were kids, brother.
Yeah. Over the years, the different problems that you've highlighted, has there been any sort of happy endings, that things actually did improve? Any success stories?
Well, look, you know, I think it's improving simply in the level of conscious awakening that we're seeing. Yes. I think it has to get a lot worse than what it is now before it's going to get better. It's got to be totally in people's faces. But, you know, I have no stake in the outcome of any of this. And when I look at the world now, there's many things that are worse about it than when I was a kid, but there's many things that are better as well. You know, and there's certainly more open dialogue about this sort of stuff and certainly more conscious awakening happening. You know, even people out there in the mainstream that you wouldn't expect are saying, hey, something's terribly wrong with the world. They don't know what it is, but they know something's right, that something's wrong. Yeah, things shouldn't be the way they are. They shouldn't be struggling the way they are. So, you know, it's got to get worse yet, but I think we are actually heading for a pretty positive future. You know, with everything they're doing with the whole 5G rollout and the whole lockdown they're attempting to put in place, I think, you know, that's really going to push it in people's faces, and most of the world simply isn't going to stand for it. We're going to realise that we don't need this economic system. We don't need to live in a state of scarcity we're forced to live in, which is all the economic system does. And, you know, I think it's going to lead to a positive future. I really do. So, you know, with all of the bad stuff that's happening, I still see a good future for mankind. I think we're going to get through this with flying colours once enough people see it in their face. You know, what we need to do is provide a safety net for those sort of people. And like you say, we don't need 10%. We don't even need 5%. You know, 1% of the population changed things in the United States when they had the American War of Independence, if that was even real, which I question now. I question all of these wars and all the stuff we've been told about history, but yeah, that was only 1% of the population. You only need a critical mass to make change. And if enough people stand up and say the right thing, enough of the sheep will follow, because that's what they do. They're just waiting to hear someone say something that they can believe in, and they'll start repeating it because that's what they do.
Yeah, well, I'm evangelical about my anarchism and anti-government feelings, and my family have sort of got used to it, and they'll send me memes or little messages. Dad, I was thinking about you because, and so it's just slowly but surely getting the message out that we don't need government, we don't need borders, we don't need flags. Tell me, I always struggle whenever I'm filling a form out, and it's usually because it's the government asked me to, and the question is nationality. I really struggle to answer that because I think borders and nationalities and flags it's poisonous, it's dangerous, it's caused more problems than anything else.
Yeah, I struggle with those sorts of questions. I mean, I do them very rarely. Probably when I'm filling out an entry form to a country is about the only time I need to write something like that when I'm travelling. I don't fill out any other government forms. So, but yeah, I know what you're saying. I mean, nationality. I'm not a nationalist at all, and it's all very. It's one thing to be proud of your people and proud of your country. I mean, I love Australia. I love the Australian people. I'm proud of what this country is. But as a country, not from anything the government's done, not because of the flag, not because of that. I just love the place. I love the trees. I love the animals. I love the wildlife. I love the people. I love the country as the country. And you should be proud of that and proud of the place that you come from. But that doesn't mean you need to be nationalistic about it. I mean, nationalism, it's good and bad. It can be good in as much as you want to love and protect the place you come from. But when you want to, support your flag and go and kill the other guys because they have a different flag or a different belief system, well, that's when it all falls down. And this is all stuff that's promoted by governments. So, I mean, I love everywhere I go. Everywhere you go is as good as the people that inhabit the place, really. So, yeah, I don't really have time for the mainstream version of nationalism, but at the same time, I do have a sense of pride and love of my place of where I was born, where I come from, as I think we all do. So I can understand nationalism on some levels, but it's because people have this perverted, indoctrinated view of what nationalism really is and how it all revolves around the flag and the government that it all becomes skewed,
Yeah.
Let me jump in real quick, if I can. So one of the things you just said, Max, was that people just really need to see someone stand up and say the right things to motivate them to change. Do you think that we've seen movies like Braveheart, or we've heard stories where people have done that, but the government cuts them down? Do you think that that's an intentional portrayal of what happens to people, and so we have that kind of a fear of speaking out because that might happen to me?
Oh, absolutely. It's all predictive programming. All of this stuff, all the movies are all designed to do that. I mean, they tell you what they're bringing in the future. They tell you never to stand up. And if there is anyone who ever beats the bad guy, it's usually like a superhero or whatever, Or so we get to live the world vicariously through them, and we feel this big sigh of relief at the end when they've saved us all. And then we can look at all these dystopian future movies like Equilibrium or what was that one where it was Matt Damon and there was the thing up in the sky, that sort of
Elysium.
Yeah, Elysium, these sorts of movies, and we think, well, we're not there yet, so we're still good. No, you're not. We are there yet, but it's always a lone gunman or a superhero or someone who saves the day. And if it's a real person who stands up, they get squashed by the system. And yeah, of course, it's deliberately done to disempower people, and also they can tell us the future they want to create, and we just allow it to be created because we think we're still good, and we don't want to poke our head up because we don't want to get banged on the head. The tall poppy gets cut down. So yeah, all predictive programming, brother.
So to follow up with that, when I first began to understand the false narrative of our existence, the scene in The Matrix where Neo comes back to life after he dies, it started to take on a more profound realization. So he stands up and he looks and sees the Matrix and the code. He doesn't see the actual agents. He sees the code. And then, they whip out their guns and fire at him, and he stops everything from happening. He just says, basically he stands up and says, I know where I am, I know what this is, and I'm taking control. Do you think it's possible for people to stand up and just say no to the construct? Do you think it's that basic? Yeah,
I do. I absolutely do. I mean, I've done it myself, and I've walked away. I've done it in legal situations, and I've walked away. I've done it in courtrooms. I've walked away. I've done it in numerous situations. I've just said no. And I've treated the person that I'm speaking to as an equal of myself. I've treated them respectfully, but not as anybody who has authority over me. They're just a living man, the same as me. So, yeah, absolutely, I think we can. If the world did it collectively, we'd change the world in a day.
And if there's anything that you can direct us to, I know that there are lots of channels that talk about it. Are there any resources that you could direct us to for our own research in that matter?
It's a hard thing, because you can read so much of it, and people go in there with a skewed intention very often. They go in there because they want the legal knowledge that they can use to go in and stand up against the system. And they want to go and take the judge on and teach him a lesson. So you're coming at it from an aggressive response straight away. For me, the system doesn't exist. It's a fiction. It's an idea that someone made up. You can read all that stuff all you want. You can get all this legal understanding. But if you're going in there with fight in your eyes and you're going and you want to combat the system and you're looking for confrontation, then you've already lost. I don't look for confrontation. I ignore the system because it's a fiction. Why am I going to give attention to something that doesn't exist? If the system ever comes for me and it ever tries to inflict itself upon me, I will talk to the people in a way that they will soon realize that I'm a living man that they have no jurisdiction over, because I'm a kind, respectful, honorable man. And I treat them that way, but I always know exactly who I am and what I'm saying. So it's a knowing. It doesn't matter how much you read. You can go and read all this stuff on it. You can work out about how the dog Latin works. You can work out all the stuff about sending your birth certificate back to the Vatican, all this stuff you want to do. It's all fiction. If you've got to take any steps to establish your freedom and you've got to fill out any forms and send stuff away and let people, well, how free do you think you are to begin with? It's all fiction anyway. If they're claiming you're not free, show me proof of claim. Show me proof of claim that you have any authority over me, because I'm a living man. If you're claiming that you get it through the legal fiction, well, this is the Bible. This is canon law, and it says on the second page of the Bible that God created man and gave man dominion over the earth. That's me. That's you. How does anybody have dominion over anybody else? It doesn't say it in that book. And if that's the book you're using for your legal system, then you've got to use the whole book. You can't cherry pick. And that's what it says on page 2. So let's talk about that point before you decide whether you've got any authority over me, because you don't. Unless you can produce a contract bearing the wet ink signature of God, which gave you authority over the vessel that I inhabit, I mean, where are we going with all this? So I just treat people with respect, and I don't think there's any real resource you can look at if you don't know it already in your heart. Doesn't matter how much you look at, you just fill your head full of information, and all this information and all these different codes and statutes and all this stuff, which is all fiction. They've got you looking at all these books of all this fiction, of all these codes and all these statutes. They just wrote it all down. It doesn't matter. It's just a man dealing with another man. It doesn't matter what they wrote down. It doesn't matter about all the codes. It doesn't matter about the legalities. It doesn't matter about any of that stuff. This is two men under the eyes of God dealing with each other. Who has ownership over who? It doesn't matter what anybody wrote down. And that's the attitude that you need to have. So if you haven't got that and you don't have that knowing in your heart, it doesn't matter how much you read. It doesn't matter how much resource you look at. And if you already have that in your heart, then why do you need these resources? You know what I mean? It's that approach, brother. And it's a weird thing to say. I mean, sure, you can go and look at all this stuff. Rodney Stewart, The Justinian Deception, got some great information. If you want to know how the legal system really works, that's a site that I highly recommend to everyone. But it's if you're going in to get information and you want to go in and fight the legal system and you're going to go in there half-cocked, then you've already lost, because that's what they want you to do. You're fighting against a cloud. It's acknowledging that it is a cloud. It's fiction. Why are you trying to fight against the fiction? Why are you trying to gather information to deal with this fiction? It's a fiction. Knowing it's a fiction is all the information that you need. You get me?
Yeah, I think so. And one of the things that I came to realize, at least by analysis, as I've listened to certain gurus with handling court issues, was I said to myself, you're still showing up for court. You're still obliging yourself to show up at all. And my question at some points was, why even show up at all?
Exactly. If they're answering the summons, then they're great. I mean, why is it called a summons? They're summoning your spirit. It's you're dead. You know, if I ever get summoned to court, I'll go there. I'll only go in as far as the doorway. I'll let them know I'm here regarding that matter, because obviously there's been some mistake. My name's been used and associated with whatever. I'm just here to clarify the matter. And I'll speak from the doorway. I won't walk into the dock. And I'll address the judge by his first name. I'll ask what the name of the judge is. Now, the Honourable Peter Smith or whatever. Hello, Peter. Okay, his name's Peter. I'll go and call him. Hey, Peter, I'm here regarding that matter. And he'll ask me if that's my name. I'll say, well, I'm the man that the reference is referring to. I don't own the name, no. The government owns the name, but blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, I'll do that sort of stuff if I have to, but I won't ever go there answering a summons. I'll go and visit with them to clarify a matter, you know, and I won't ever walk into their court and into their jurisdiction. I won't ever walk into the dock. But I've only had to do that a couple of times. In the last couple of times I've done it, I think they've put a little black mark next to my name saying, don't bring this guy into the courtroom. Don't send this guy any summonses, because they sort of leave me alone now. But that's the way you need to deal with it. If you've got to go to court, go there just to clarify the matter, and don't go there answering the summons, and don't walk into the dock, you know.
All right, so real quick, I'm just going to try to screen share here. I'm going to show you the video that I was referring to with the beach footage. So give me just 1 second. I'm going to try to bring this up, okay?
Okay.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
But getting back to my point, when we look at a scene like this, and we look at a building like I just showed, and then we see tents, and the people who don't really seem to be very accustomed to going to the beach. Tents, not really bathing suits, not really beach clothing. You know, people are making do with what they have.
I'm going to stop it right here because, like, can you see this guy right here that's got his hand over his chest?
Yeah. But they've got beach clothing on. He's got beach clothing on, and so's the guy in the foreground here. And so's the woman behind her with the over to the left with the tie on. No, down a little bit these are all bathing suits. There's a lot of people there in bathing suits, and there's a lot of with these this looks like it's some sort of a contest, a surfing contest or a beach contest. They got pavilions, they got tents,
and actually very nice.
And you look at the style of clothing. That woman right there just in the center left,
umbrellas,
with the little tie thing around her neck, that's a bathing suit. She's in the bottom right there. There she is. Yeah, that lady. That's a bathing suit for the 1920s, 1930s. She's got a cap on her head. That's just what women used to wear back then. So yeah, I don't know what he's saying, but it looks like that's some sort of an event. They got pavilion up. They got signs up. It looks like there's an event on the beach or something. But all those people there, they're all in bathing suits.
Well, that's what I thought too, even here. But his point was, look, they don't have any beach towels. And I was thinking, that's because they didn't really, it's like necessity is the mother of invention. I'm sure someone was like, how the hell do I keep myself from getting sand all over? What if we laid a beach towel down? And that's where they came from, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, they're just all laying around in the sand having a good time. Yeah, that's just, I can't see anything strange about that photo. It looks like some sort of event on the beach. Could be a swimming event or anything, you know. So you just don't know.
Yeah, I had he does some interesting talks about he had an interesting talk on Toledo.
I've watched some of his stuff and I like some of the stuff he said. I actually recommended his channel the other day, but I mean people will make guns out of molehills at the same time. I mean, it's good to look at things, but I don't know whether there's anything going on there. But it doesn't detract from some of the other stuff that he's done, which is good.
And so let's just segue real quick, because I missed the follow-up question after I asked initially about the premise of the mud flood. You mentioned Martin Lika, and I was just wondering, overall, what's your assessment of his approach? How do you appreciate his contribution to the whole discussion?
Look, I think he's done some good dot connecting. I don't agree with everything he says, but I think he's done some good dot connecting. I think a lot of his research should be respected and looked at. I haven't looked at a great deal, to be honest. I just haven't had times because he does such long videos. And I've watched 10 or 15 minutes and he hasn't really said anything because he does sort of long chats and, I mean, there's little nuggets in there, but you've got to get to the nuggets. And sometimes I just don't have time to sift through. So, but I mean, he seems like a nice enough guy. I don't have any real opinion. I've never spoken to him. I've never had any real interaction with him. But I like to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. I like to give everybody credit for research. I think what he presented, some of the research he's presented on the mud flood and some of the research he's presented on the fasci and stuff like that and on free energy, the energy buildings, I think is quite worthwhile research. I think the research, if people want to find out about the mud flood and information on it, there's a YouTube channel man called Philip Dresden, is a Russian guy who I think was the person who pretty well brought this to public attention to begin with, and he's put out a lot of good information on it. So that's another channel that I recommend if people want information on the mud flood. And again, we're only calling it a mud flood because we don't have another name for it. We don't know what happened. That's all these people saying, if it's a mud flood, then where did the mud come from? Or was it? We don't know. We don't know. All we know is that there are buildings that have 12 to 18 feet of construction below ground that should not be there. And it is being found in countries all around the world, which indicates that there's an event that happened quite recently in our history that we're simply not being told about. And the question is why? That's what people need to look at when they look at that. So, I mean, Martin's addressed a fair bit of that sort of stuff. So, yeah, good on him for what he's doing. As I said, I can't really give you any personal opinion. I haven't had any real interaction with anyone. I find it very difficult to trust people after some of the stuff I've been through.
No, yeah, I just meant in terms of just the content of what he's been putting out. So you mentioned, I think his name is.
I think he's done some great stuff. I think he's made a valuable contribution.
Right. Was his name Philip Dresden? Is that what you said?
Philip Dresden. It's Druzhinin, I think. Dresden.
Okay. All right. And then, if you don't mind, the other reference you gave in terms of the courtroom, do you remember the name that you threw out?
Oh, Romilly Stewart, the Justinian Deception. There's a website called the Justinian Deception. He will give you some amazing information on how the legal system really works, how the dog Latin works. He's done some remarkable work. And he will also warn you that if you want to use this method, be prepared for some very, very strong pushbacks from the government. They will not like you if you start calling them out on dog Latin. They virtually made his life hell because he went into court and he called them out on their use of dog Latin and the grammatical deception that they use in all their legal documents. And they're really giving him a hard time over it. So, people who want to step into that world, that's why it's very, you got to be very careful if you're getting this information because you want to go and fight the government. Well, you're fighting a cloud, and it's a cloud that has far more power than you. And just the fact that it's a cloud and you want to go and fight it, you're fighting against something that doesn't exist. So how awake are you really? Like I said, I'll deal with it if it comes to me because it's a cloud trying to claim it has jurisdiction over me, and I'll just let it know that it's a fiction, and then it goes away. But I won't ever go attacking for it. You don't go and poke and prod it and wait for the response because you want to show off to your friends how much you put a judge in his place or whatever. That's just silly. You don't want to go looking for confrontation. You just want to be prepared and know how to defend yourself should the confrontation come looking for you.
All right. So I suppose one of the things that people bring up is choosing your battles. So do you not intentionally resist the boogeyman, so to speak, the false narrative? So, for instance, say registering your car.
My car's registered. I have a driver's license. I have a car registration. I have a passport because I want freedom of movement. I don't want to have to deal with a brain-dead police officer 3 times a day who I have to explain all this to, who won't understand it. I'll end up spending an hour of my day sitting on the side of the road arguing with a cop. Then I'll go down the road and another one will pull me up and I'll have to do the same thing again. I'm just not interested in it. So, Yeah, and on the side of the road, if police want to give me a speeding ticket or do whatever, I just say yes or no, sir, 3 bags full, sir. There's 2 cops on the side of the road and one of me. They can do whatever they want. They can tase me, say that I assaulted them, put me in a nut house for questioning their jurisdiction or whatever they want to do. Lock me up for psychiatric evaluation because I'm saying the cops have no authority over me. And they can get away with it because there's 2 of them and there's 1 of me. That's the way it is. I mean, pick your battles, absolutely. But if I walk into a courtroom, well, I've got a crowd of people there, and I can demonstrate to these people how you should talk to a judge and how you should talk to the police and how you should talk to the prosecutor, and I can walk out of that room a free man and I can show them all how to do it while I'm there. So that's choosing your battles. But, arguing with cops on the side of the road because you want to prove yourself, what for? You're a fool. These are violent thugs who can do anything they want with impunity and get away with it and just call it whatever they want to call it for, and the law will do nothing to prosecute them. So, yeah, absolutely, you should pick your battles.
All right, Mark, are you wanting to ask anything?
Just one note I've got here. I've heard yourself and Jeff Berwick talk about ayahuasca. What are the do's and don'ts of using ayahuasca?
I think if you're going to drink ayahuasca, you should do it with a reputable shaman in a safe environment. I think it's something that's highly beneficial for people, but I think it's something that's abused. I mean, I spend a lot of my time living on an ayahuasca retreat in Peru. I try to spend about 6 months of the year there if I can, but it hasn't been working out lately. But even with doing that, I haven't drank ayahuasca for probably 5 years since I last drank ayahuasca. It's just not calling me. I can't see any benefit I would get from drinking it at the moment. I mean, if it calls me again, I will. But if it doesn't, it doesn't. I mean, I think a lot of people drink too much and then they spend the rest of their lives talking about themselves and their experience, and it becomes this narcissistic thing for them. But in some circumstances, I think it can be highly beneficial. 30 years of psychotherapy in 3 hours can really help a lot of people out. I've seen it completely change people's lives for the better. I haven't seen anybody that it's hurt. I have seen some people become it's slightly difficult for them to reintegrate back into society after drinking the medicine, which can be maybe disturbing for some people because they see the crap they're swimming in. I mean, they come out of the jungle and go, wow, that's the way we should be living. And they get back to somewhere like New York or LA and they find it very difficult to cope. So that's a danger that people need to be aware of. But, if it's done in good surroundings and good circumstances with a responsible shaman around, I think it's a highly beneficial medicine.
So it should be done with somebody looking after you.
Yeah, you need to have a shaman. You need to have someone there guiding you, helping you with the singing the Icaro, burning the Mapacha smoke. You need to have the smoke around you. I mean, things like all of this stuff, I believe, can probably open you up to spirit possession. So you need to have someone around who's aware of that, who can create that protective space for you. This is why I always burn Mapacha smoke and stuff. Like the Mapacha tobacco is always present in ceremony because tobacco smoke prevents spirit possession, which I would suggest is why they took a sacred medicine like tobacco, brought it from the jungle, filled it full of chemicals and toxins, got everybody addicted to tobacco, and then said, oh, look, that stuff's poison, don't smoke it, and had this big anti-smoking campaign to make sure no one smokes because they don't want you to have tobacco smoke around because it prevents spirit possession. It's a very, very protective medicine. Tobacco is one of the most sacred medicines in the jungle, and Mapacha tobacco.
Wow. Listen, Max, it's been great to talk to you. That's all my questions finished.
Thank you, Mark. Well, they do that with everything, you see. They turn tobacco into a poison. They did it with cacao. Look what they did to chocolate. Brought that to the West and look, they turned that into a poison. It's a superfood, Look what they did to that one. So they do it with everything.
All right, Max, now we come to that part of our show where we take it easy. We're just going to throw you some softball questions and see how fast you can answer them. Cricket or rugby?
Neither.
Zoo or aquarium?
Aquarium.
Beatles or the Stones?
Oh, that's a hard one. Depending on my mood, both.
Opera or ballet?
Oh, neither.
432 or 440?
432.
The Man from Snowy River or Crocodile Dundee?
The man from Snowy River.
Foster's or Vegemite?
Well, I don't drink, so I'd have to say Vegemite.
Three Dog Night or In Excess?
Nah, not a fan of either.
Okay. Straw Man or Living Man?
Living Man.
Early Bird or Night Owl?
Both.
Alchemy or Big Pharma?
Alchemy.
Sydney or Melbourne?
Sydney.
Tesla or Einstein?
Tesla.
Trust your senses or trust consensus?
Trust your senses.
All right. Thanks so much for taking it easy with us, Max. Now we're going to get back to the hard-hitting questions. Okay, Max, here at Red Hen Radio, we try to provide substantial content for our listening audience, and this is an opportunity for you to share something with us about Max Egan that no one else knows. Only on Red Hen Radio can you find out this little nugget about Max Egan. Well, I guess you're going to have to tune in next time to find out what that little nugget is about Max Egan. You know the way it goes here at Red Hen Radio. We leave you with a cliffhanger, bringing you back next time. Thanks so much for listening. Mark Doxey, thanks so much for being a participant in this episode as well. And make sure that you subscribe. Make sure that you give a thumbs up. Make sure that you share and hit that bell notification so you can be kept up to date with Red Hen Radio. I'm your host, Travis Finley. Until next time.